Good morning, my friends. I want to start with a simple question. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where it seemed like things were falling apart? A moment where everything looked wrong and you couldn't see how it could ever be right. I want to talk to you today about something that I believe will change the way you see your life, your struggles, and your future. We often make judgments based on what we can see on the surface, but I'm here to tell you today it's not what it looks like. God has a way of showing up in the most unexpected places, in the most unexpected moments, and at the most unexpected times. Have you ever been in a season where it seemed like you were stuck, overlooked, or misunderstood? Well, I have good news for you. God has been waiting on you. He's been sitting by the well of your life, waiting for you to come, not because you're perfect, but because you're important to Him. I know some of you are saying, but it looks like my dreams are dead. It looks like my mistakes are too big. It looks like I've missed my chance. But let me tell you, what you see is not the end of your story. There's something greater going on, and if you hang on a little longer, if you trust a little deeper, you're going to see that God's plan for you is far bigger than what it looks like right now. So stay with me, because by the end of this message, you're going to understand that God is working behind the scenes, turning everything around for your good. This isn't just a sermon. This is a prophetic word for somebody who needs to hear that the best is still ahead of you. Let's take a look at a powerful story from the Gospel of John, where Jesus shows us exactly how His plan unfolds in ways we least expect. God's timing is often far different from our own, and His way of operating rarely matches the expectations we set for ourselves. Many of us struggle with the feeling of being overlooked, forgotten, or stuck in a moment that seems to stretch on forever. We may be in a season where things aren't moving forward, and it feels like our prayers are falling on deaf ears. But here's the truth. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean God isn't working. In fact, often it's in the waiting that God is setting things in place for something bigger than we could have imagined. Consider the times in the Bible when God showed up at the most unexpected moments. Think about the story of the Samaritan woman at the well. Jesus, knowing that He had a divine mission to fulfill, sat by the well in the heat of the day, waiting for the right moment to reveal Himself to her. At first glance, it seemed like an ordinary encounter. After all, He was just sitting by a well, and she was simply drawing water. But what was happening beneath the surface was far more significant than what the human eye could perceive. Jesus was making an intentional move to reach someone whom society had cast aside, and His timing was perfect. This encounter illustrates how God's timing often doesn't make sense from a human perspective. The woman was going about her day, likely unaware that her life was about to change forever. The disciples, who had just returned with food after being sent on a long errand, were caught off guard by the fact that Jesus was engaging with her, a woman who, by all standards, would have been seen as unworthy of His attention. To the disciples, it seemed like an awkward moment, something that defied logic. But Jesus was operating from a higher understanding. He wasn't just there to satisfy His own needs or to follow conventional patterns. He was there for a purpose. This is the same way God works in our lives. We may not understand why we are waiting or why things are taking longer than we expect. But what we can know for sure is that God is never inactive, even in the moments that feel like stagnation. He's preparing us for a future that is beyond our wildest dreams. In the waiting, God is cultivating something that will bring glory to His name and a breakthrough to your life. Just as Jesus waited by the well for the Samaritan woman, God is waiting on you, setting everything in place for the moment you encounter Him in a fresh way. You may feel like you're stuck or that nothing is moving forward, but remember that God's perfect timing is always at work. He sees the big picture, and He is orchestrating the pieces in ways we may not immediately understand. When you feel like you're in a season of waiting or confusion, know that God is not wasting your time. He's preparing you for what's next. So don't lose hope, and don't be discouraged by what you can't see right now. God's plan is unfolding, And you'll understand it better when you look back at how every moment, every delay, and every waiting period led you right to where you needed to be. Perception is a powerful thing, and often we are limited by how we see ourselves and our circumstances. The way others view us can also shape how we see ourselves. If we allow ourselves to be defined by the labels others place on us or by our own misgivings, it's easy to become trapped in a false narrative. We might look at a situation and immediately decide that it's hopeless or that we are not capable of overcoming the challenges we face. But what if everything we thought was true was not the full picture? What if the reality is far more promising than we could imagine? The Samaritan woman at the well is a perfect example of how our perception of ourselves can be drastically different from how God sees us. When she came to the well, she came with an attitude of caution and deflection. She had been rejected by her community and was used to being judged. The way others had seen her based on her past mistakes created a wall between her and the truth of her potential. She didn't expect to encounter someone who saw her differently, someone who saw beyond her past and her flaws. Jesus, however, didn't view her in the way others did. While the world saw a woman with a checkered past, he saw a vessel for transformation, a woman who could carry the message of hope to an entire city. In the same way many of us carry the weight of how others perceive us, we might look at our past mistakes, our struggles, or our failures, and believe that we're beyond redemption. We might think that because of the things we've done or the battles we fought, there's no room for us to become something greater. But God does not see us based on our mistakes. He sees us as He created us to be, full of potential, full of purpose, and full of His love. Our perception often holds us back from stepping into the fullness of who we are called to be. We look at our failures and see them as permanent obstacles, forgetting that they are merely part of the process. We may look at our circumstances and think that they define us, that this is the end of the road, but God has a different perspective. He is not bound by time or circumstance. He sees the beginning from the end, and He knows exactly what we are capable of, even when we don't see it ourselves. The way we perceive ourselves can hinder our growth if we allow it to, but once we shift our focus and begin to see ourselves through God's eyes, we can experience a radical transformation. The woman at the well didn't know the fullness of who she was until she encountered Jesus. Her perception of herself was altered in a single moment when He revealed that He was the Messiah. This revelation didn't just change her view of Him, it changed her view of herself. She went from being a woman hiding from her community to a bold witness telling everyone about the man who told her everything she had ever done. When we stop seeing ourselves through the lens of our failures and start seeing ourselves through the lens of God's grace and purpose, we open ourselves up to possibilities we never thought possible. God sees beyond our mistakes, beyond our circumstances, and into the heart of who we are meant to be. The next time you look in the mirror, remember that God sees a person of destiny, someone full of potential, someone who is capable of doing far more than they could even imagine. What you see may not always align with the truth of who you are, but God's vision for your life is far greater than what meets the eye. It's easy to think that God is only interested in the people who have it all together, the ones who look like they've got it figured out, the ones who seem polished and perfect on the outside. But time and time again, God shows us that He's interested in the people who are broken, the ones who are hurting, and the ones who have been rejected. When Jesus sat by the well waiting for the Samaritan woman, He didn't see her for the mistakes she had made or the judgment placed on her by society. He saw her for who she truly was, someone He was willing to wait for, someone He had a plan for. There is a powerful truth here. God doesn't just show up for the perfect or the well put together. He shows up for those who have been cast aside, for the ones who have been overlooked or marginalized. We see this time again throughout Scripture. When everyone else counted out the woman at the well, Jesus made a deliberate choice to go out of His way to be there for her. He wasn't interested in her past. He was focused on her future. In that moment, Jesus broke every cultural and societal boundary. He didn't care that she was a Samaritan or that she was a woman with a questionable history. He was there to offer her the living water that would change her life forever. This is an important reminder for us. No matter where we've been, no matter what we've done, God is willing to meet us right where we are. He is willing to break through every barrier, every preconceived notion, and every boundary to reach us. It doesn't matter what the world says about us or how many mistakes we've made. God's love isn't restricted by our imperfections. He isn't looking for perfection. He's looking for hearts that are open, willing to be transformed by His grace. The Samaritan woman's life was forever changed, not because she had it all together, but because she was willing to receive the living water that Jesus offered. That's the power of God's grace. It isn't dependent on our past or our mistakes. It's not based on what we've done, but on what He's already done for us. Jesus didn't wait for the woman to clean up her life before He offered her this living water. He offered it to her in her brokenness, in her need, and in her most vulnerable moment. That's the kind of God we serve, a God who reaches out to us in our mess, in our struggles, and in our imperfection. He meets us where we are, with all our flaws and failures, and gives us the chance to start again. When we look at our own lives, we might feel unworthy of God's love. But the truth is that God has a plan for us, no matter how broken or far off course we may feel. Just like the Samaritan woman, God is waiting for us, even in our lowest points. He is sitting by the well, ready to offer us the living water that will change us. It's not about waiting until we are perfect. It's about allowing God to meet us in our imperfection and change us from the inside out. So if you feel like you've been forgotten, overlooked, or rejected, know this: God is waiting for you. He's pursuing you, and He's ready to offer you what you need most. It's not about how perfect your life looks, but about your willingness to receive what He has to offer. God is not interested in what you've done. He's interested in what He can do through you when you allow Him to work in your life. There are moments in life when everything seems to go wrong, when everything we've worked for feels like it's slipping through our fingers, or when we face opposition that seems insurmountable. It's in those moments that our faith is tested and our perception of what's possible can become clouded by our circumstances. However, it is often in these very moments of struggle that God is at work in ways we cannot immediately understand. The situation may look bleak, but God is laying the foundation for something far greater than we can see in the moment. What appears to be a setback could be the very thing that positions us for the breakthrough we've been praying for. Take the moment when Jesus chose to sit by the well and wait for the Samaritan woman. To the disciples, it may have seemed strange. They had been sent to retrieve food, and now as they returned, they found Jesus talking to a woman who wasn't even from their people. They must have been confused by the situation, questioning what Jesus was doing. To them, it may have seemed like a wasted opportunity, or perhaps even an unwise decision, given the cultural context of their time. But what they didn't realize was that Jesus wasn't wasting time. He was fulfilling a divine purpose, and in that moment, He was shifting the atmosphere for a breakthrough. When you're in a season of uncertainty, it's easy to feel like you're wasting time, like nothing is moving forward. But God doesn't operate on the same timeline we do. While we may see the situation as stagnant or hopeless, He is preparing us for what's coming next. The Samaritan woman never imagined that her ordinary trip to the well would lead to an extraordinary encounter with the Messiah. She was just going about her routine, unaware that God was about to shift her life in ways she couldn't fathom. And that's the beauty of God's timing. He often works in the background while we're focused on our day-to-day struggles, quietly setting the stage for a breakthrough that will exceed our expectations. The disciples were focused on what they could see: the physical need for food, the immediate desire for rest after a long journey. But Jesus was focused on the bigger picture, the eternal need of a soul. He saw beyond the surface, beyond the moment, and into the potential of what could happen if the Samaritan woman received His message. The breakthrough wasn't in the meal or in the disciples' expectations. It was in the transformation of a woman who would go on to impact an entire city. In the same way, our breakthrough is often hidden in the midst of our struggles. What seems like a detour, a delay, or even a failure may actually be the very moment God is setting us up for something far greater than we could ever imagine. The lesson here is clear. Even when it feels like things are not moving in the direction we hoped, God is working behind the scenes, preparing us for what's next. We may not see it, we may not understand it, but that doesn't mean He's not at work. When we find ourselves in these waiting seasons, we must remember that God doesn't waste time. He isn't caught off guard by our setbacks or struggles. Instead, He uses every moment to refine us, to teach us, and to position us for the breakthrough we've been praying for. The disciples didn't understand why Jesus was talking to the Samaritan woman, but that conversation led to a harvest that no one could have predicted. So when you find yourself in the waiting room of life, trust that God is setting the stage for something far greater than you could ever imagine. Your breakthrough is closer than you think. In our lives, there will always be people who believe they have the right to define who we are, what we can achieve, and what we deserve. Society, family, and sometimes even ourselves can place limits on what we think is possible. We are constantly bombarded with messages that tell us what we should be, what we should have, or what we should accomplish in a specific time frame. The woman at the well experienced this firsthand. Her past was a subject of scorn, her social status was marginalized, and her very identity was shaped by the labels placed upon her by those around her. But in that very moment of rejection, when society had written her off, Jesus was waiting at the well to change everything. Sometimes the people who define you the most are those who don't see the full picture. They only see the surface, but they don't see the heart, the potential, or the plan that God has for your life. You may have been rejected, hurt, or looked down upon, and people may have written you off as unworthy or incapable. Yet God doesn't see you through the eyes of others. He sees the person He created you to be, and He knows the great things He has called you to accomplish. Jesus showed the woman at the well that her past did not have the power to define her future. Though she had made mistakes, though her reputation preceded her, Jesus didn't let that stop Him from offering her living water. In fact, He knew her past, yet He still chose her to be the one who would carry the message to the city. What others saw as unworthy, Jesus saw as an opportunity to demonstrate the power of grace and transformation. It's important for us to remember that no one can define your worth or your destiny but God. People may try to place labels on you, labels of failure, labels of defeat, or labels of disappointment, but none of these labels hold any weight when compared to the power of God's calling on your life. No matter how many times you've fallen short, no matter how many mistakes you've made, God's love for you and His purpose for your life remain unshaken. He isn't bound by the opinions of others. He sees you as you truly are capable of greatness, worthy of His love, and equipped for His purpose. The woman at the well might have been a surprise to many, but not to Jesus. He knew her better than she knew herself. He didn't hesitate to offer her grace because He understood that what was on the inside of her was far more valuable than the mistakes that defined her past. It was in that moment that her transformation began, not when she realized her worth in the eyes of the world, but when she realized her worth in the eyes of God. When you are doubting your purpose or wondering if you are too far gone to be used by God, remember the woman at the well. She came to the well as an outcast, but she left as an evangelist, a messenger of truth. She carried the word of Jesus back to her people, leading them to faith in Him. This was a woman who had been defined by the labels of her past, yet she was the very one chosen to break down the barriers between two nations, to bring a message of hope and redemption to a people who were forgotten by others. You are not defined by your past or by the opinions of others. God has placed a calling on your life that is greater than what you see in the natural. Just as He saw the potential in the woman at the well, He sees the potential in you. No matter what anyone says, you are important to God. And He is waiting for you to step into the greatness He has designed for you. There is a calling on your life that no one else can fulfill, and God is ready to use you in ways you never imagined. Don't let anyone tell you what you can't do. You are more than enough in his eyes, and he is ready to use you to change the world. In every season of life, there are moments when we feel overwhelmed, unsure, or even incapable of moving forward. We might look around and see obstacles or challenges that seem insurmountable, or feel as though we've reached the end of our journey. But it is precisely during these moments that we are on the brink of something significant. Just because it seems like nothing is happening or like things aren't going the way we planned, doesn't mean that God's plan isn't unfolding. The very things that seem like setbacks or detours are often the moments where God is positioning us for greater things. The woman at the well was a perfect example of this truth. She came to the well expecting to do the same thing she always did, draw water. But in that moment, everything changed. Her seemingly ordinary task became the very place where her destiny shifted. She wasn't just meeting Jesus, she was meeting her Savior and the one who would change her life forever. What seemed like just another day at the well turned into the moment of transformation that altered her future and the future of her entire community. It's easy to overlook the importance of moments like these, where the everyday tasks of life feel mundane and routine. But there is always a deeper purpose to the moments that feel ordinary. God doesn't waste any part of your journey. The struggles, the hardships, and even the moments when you feel like you're not moving forward are often the spaces where God is preparing you for something bigger than you can imagine. Think about how the woman must have felt that day. She was already carrying the weight of her past, knowing the judgments others had placed on her. She might have thought that nothing could change, that her life would be defined by her mistakes and the opinions of others. But at the well, in the most unexpected place, God met her and revealed to her that her past did not define her future. It was in this encounter that she found a new purpose, one that would take her far beyond her current circumstances. The same is true for each of us. You may be in a season of waiting or facing situations that feel like obstacles in your path. But the truth is, you're on the verge of something big. Every setback you've faced, every doubt you've had, and every disappointment you've experienced is a part of the process that's shaping you for something greater. Even when it looks like things are stagnant or hopeless, remember that God is preparing you for the next step, the next breakthrough, and the next chapter in your story. Just as the woman's encounter with Jesus changed your entire perspective, your encounter with God has the power to transform every area of your life. It may not look like much right now, and it may feel like you're stuck in a cycle of repetition or limitation. But rest assured that God is waiting for you to step into the fullness of your destiny. He sees the potential in you that others may not see, and he is working behind the scenes to bring about something powerful in your life. In times of uncertainty, hold on to the truth that your breakthrough is just ahead. You might not see it right now, but trust that God is moving on your behalf. Your destiny is not determined by your circumstances, but by the divine purpose that God has placed inside of you. When you feel discouraged, remember that God is preparing you for something bigger. He is making a way where there seems to be no way, and he is about to open doors that will take you into fullness of your calling. Stay faithful, stay hopeful, and know that you are on the verge of something big. Your moment is coming, and it will be worth the wait.